Huff has been emerging as one of the great textual scholars. I actually don't know his background in terms of university, but he has. I've interacted with him shortly throughout the years. He used to be part of an apologetic group that I was in with a bunch of other people on Facebook when I was back on Facebook years ago. Brilliant person. I reference him often if people have questions about text, along with Peter J. Williams, who is Dr. Williams is further down the road than Wes is, but Wes still has is more outspoken, I think, than Williams on certain topics. So while I've interviewed Williams before, I've never interviewed Huff. But Huff is rising up now because he just put out a bunch of stuff against Carson, who, if you don't know, is his name Billy? Is it Billy Carson? Whatever the guy out there is talking about the Sinai gospel, the guy that everyone knows is a fraud and doesn't know anything, but is somehow getting, like, riding this wave of ignorance almost. But what's interesting is in this interview with Julian Dory, Wes actually does stuff that I used to do when I was at university and studying these things, was ignoring certain aspects of history and refusing to say certain terminologies. And I wanted to quickly point out some of these because I think while Wes is brilliant, he's not being intellectually honest in certain areas. And I don't mean that in like a pointing a finger way. Everyone's intellectually dishonest at some point, knowingly or unknowingly. And that's how you learn. So I wanted to point these out and get to some of these examples and just kind of, have a relaxed video kind of going through some of these. So one of the first ones I saw, and we can listen to some of this, which I kind of find it very interesting, is just around the 40-minute mark here. Let's see.
In terms of, are you a Christian? And they maybe weren't as transparent. And they were called the Trottadors. And this is actually where we get the word traitor from.
Interesting.
And now they're all part of groups of church communities. And remember, church in Greek, ekklesia, just means congregation.
So, yes, but these congregations were not sporadic as we have them today. We know this historically and through the writings of the early church, through historians and all this other stuff. So it's unequivocal that these were not just random scattered congregations of sects and groups of Christianity, that they were collective. So if this person over here was saying this person over here knew what this person was talking about and who they were talking to, and who they were collective. They were not hidden from each other or separated from each other. They were a collective church under a bishop, and a word that Wes unfortunately refuses to use, at least in this context. So they're not spread out and dismantled in that way. They are a congregation, and then a schism happens with the group that he's talking about, because the group who is Orthodox and the bishop, the collective of bishops, end up pointing out the heresy of this and the issues with this. And, we find this out through history, different councils in history, but there's something else that pops up here that Wes kind of refuses to say, which I've already mentioned, but I'll mention it again here in a second.
So they're part of these congregations, these local congregations, but
they have multiple congregations. There's a congregation. There's not multiple congregations.
There are these other groups who have...
They're not, at this point, they're not other groups. It's one group of collective Christians under one congregation in that area. There are people who believe other things or saying other things that are within that group. And then later down, it's a schism.
Said that they're going to give up Christ and say, well, we didn't really mean it. But then there are also people who have come out of prison, who have lost limbs for their faith, or have had family members who died as martyrs. And this becomes a big problem in the church. And so they have to figure it out. And it's one of the earliest controversies that took place. It's called the Donatist controversy.
Yeah, I pulled this up while you're saying. I just want to read this so people have background. Donatism was it became a Christian sect leading to a schism in the church in the region of the Church of Carthage from the 4th to the 6th centuries.
So right there, even by the definition, he even points out what I'm saying is it's a specific region, and you don't have congregations within that region. You have a congregation of believers. That's why a schism can occur. If you have multiple congregations, schism already occurs, and the group over here that's doing heresy doesn't affect the group over here. That's what you see today in Protestantism. So it's a congregation, and the reason why there's an issue and a controversy is because that's one congregation going against each other. It's not multiple congregations.
Tis argued that Christian clergy must be faultless for their ministry to be effective and their prayers and sacraments to be valid. Donatism had its roots in the long-established Christian community of the Roman province, Africa, Proconsularis, present-day Tunisia, the northeast of Algeria, and the western coast of Libya, and Mauritania, Tingitana, roughly with the northern part of present-day Morocco, in the persecutions of Christians under Diocletian. Named after the Berber Christian bishop Donatus Magnus, Donatism flourished during the 4th and 5th centuries. Donatism mainly spread among the indigenous Berber population, and Donatists were able to blend Christianity with many of the Berber local customs. So it's an offshoot, but they had a clear at the front end different idea on I guess how the church is supposed to be carried out.
Well, it was particularly what happens if you have an elder within your local congregation who, say, has baptized you, but they offered an inch of incense. Sorry, I didn't say that right. Offered a pinch of incense. Easy for me to say.
There you go.
On the altar of Caesar. Is your baptism legitimate? That was the question in terms of that. And so part of this theological question was, where is the power of your baptism? Is it in your confession of faith and the actual...
That's an offshoot theological question that came from this, which is a problem in itself. But the main question that was being asked was, are the sacraments valid if said person doing... It's not elder, by the way, at the time, because we know from at this point in time, nothing was done without the bishop. Now, I know terminology there, but I'm just going to use the word that every earlier church father used, which is bishop. So when you have baptism occur, and that said person is kind of doing what he said, where maybe he said, Hail Caesar, or he said something like that someone else died for not saying. The problem was they viewed it as a sacrament that... This was a question I had before becoming Catholic. I was like, what if a priest... Let's bring it to the future. What if a priest is sinning? Can he still bless the sacrament of the Eucharist? Can he still bless the sacrament of confession? Are these things tainted because of someone's sin? The answer is no, and we know that now for many reasons, and it dates back all the way to the first, second, and third centuries, because these questions aren't new that we have, right? So I find that interesting, but the way that Wes is defending it or explaining it is subverting ancient ecclesia. So that's one of the things I used to do all the time. I would refrain from using the word bishop, refrain from using the word deacon, and all these other things, because I didn't like the way that St. Ignatius of Antioch or whoever was speaking about them, because I'm arrogant.
Immersion, or is it in the person who has been set aside as clergy who has done this to you?
Yes.
By the way, the answer now is the sacraments are not affected by someone's sin that is doing them. It is the person receiving them in the power of God. So this person doing the blessing or doing the median between the two is irrelevant almost.
Because you had these individuals who they didn't become martyrs when maybe the other groups thought they should become martyrs, and now they're leaders in the church. So that was part of this Donatist controversy. Now, this is all leading up to the Council of Nicaea, remember?
Yeah.
So you have...
I was waiting in anticipation.
Yeah, I know. So
timeline.
let me just say right off the bat, the Council of Nicaea, the reason it was called was to deal with an issue called Arianism.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a guy named Arius who was a minister in North Africa, and he believed that Jesus was God, but he believed that Jesus was created by the Father and the Godhead. So
the Godhead?
Yeah, so in Trinitarian belief, the Godhead is usually the term that's referred to as, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
So we're going to fast forward a little bit to try to find it. I want to see if he will say the Council of Bishops decided upon through their authority that was heresy. Because this is something that I used to do as a Protestant. I would kind of ignore the fact that it was a Council of Bishops. I would just be like, oh, well, the people who are right decided that it was wrong, which is so illogical, it's not even funny. But I adhered to that for so long. It was those who, with apostolic succession, getting together and offering polemic against the heresy, number one. Number two, rightly defining the terms and dogmatizing those things. Now, you would not have the Trinitarian dogmas that you have unless these apostolic succeeded bishops collectively got together and decided these things under their authority. You don't have that happening, you don't have the dogmas you have today. You don't even have dogma at all, basically. You just have this sporadic beliefs and all these things that are seeping into the schisms, or seeping into the church, causing schisms.
In the one being of God, there are three co-equal, co-eternal persons, the same beings himself. That's not what Trinitarians believe. And ultimately, it led to what is referred to as patripassionalism, that the Father died on the cross in the person of Jesus.
Oh, okay.
And they said, we don't believe that. Okay, so Arius is seeing some of the ways that Trinitarian theology is being articulated, and his motivations are actually, I think, correct, in that he's trying to guard against modalism, which had been, I think, appropriately...
And this is something we do today, is we guard against one, creating another, right? Guard against one heresy, creating another heresy. You can slip into heresy in and out of it pretty quickly when you start talking about the nuances of mystery. So maybe just don't talk about it and trust the church's already articulated counsels and already articulated articles about the things.
Condemned by the church as something that doesn't actually reflect what we see within the scripture.
Okay, so he does say they're condemned by the church, which is such a phrase. And by the way, I'm not attacking Wes in this at all. It's almost like I'm talking to my past self, because everything he's saying I've said in my past, and I've articulated that way. I do find it so interesting that he does it too, though. And where I'm like, oh yeah, the church. Well, who is the church and who makes these decisions? Again, the apostolic succession or succeeded bishops collectively getting together and using their authority and the wisdom of the Holy Spirit in prayer, just like in Acts 15, 21, Acts 21, I don't know, one of those, where they decide these things. It is good to the Spirit, and we have decided that this is the case. So it's like the church, when he says the church, it is the collective of bishops that we have. It's just like we have today, the magisterium. So it's that connection or admittance that I had to do in my faith journey and my understanding of church history and all this stuff is so interesting and so fun. Honestly, I mean, it's fun to be wrong and learn new things, right?
But while his motivations might have been correct, his method was then to kind of overcompensate and develop this theology where the Father been established centuries before.
Not for the Roman Empire, though.
What do you mean?
Meaning, this is where the Roman Empire officially kind of makes their shift to like, yay, we're Christians now, right? Like that's.
So it isn't.
It isn't.
No. So Constantine converts to Christianity, but he doesn't make Christianity the imperial religion of Rome. That's
right. Not lawfully. Right.
Yeah. So that's under Theodosius, which is after him.
But it becomes accepted as a result of this.
It becomes decriminalized.
Yes.
Previous to this, before he even converts.
Right.
Dude, Wes is so good at articulating and being very succinct in explaining this misnomer that, Constantine in Rome, made Christianity the world religion or whatever. No, actually, paganism was still the thing. He just came along and was like, we'll allow Christians to do the thing, we'll stop killing them. That's a big difference, a big leap in, revisionist history to say that it became, or he made it the universal religion, which is so silly and so stupid. And Wes does such a great job of succinctly saying that and articulating that. So I think I pointed out what I wanted to point out here. And if I'm going to continue watching this, and if I find anything, I'll add it on. But I really find it interesting that most Protestants who know, you can talk about James White. Now, Wes and James White are different polar bears. I mean, Wes is... I would find it hard to disagree with Wes on a lot of things. Where James White, I just know he either knows or is ignorant of certain things. And I think I've made the point that if you're Protestant and you are purposely not using specific phrases, bishop of councils, magisterium, neglecting the fact that the definition of church in the early times of the church, meaning the church, was sitting at these councils was the disciples of the disciples of the disciples of the apostles. Like that line, that's why we have the arguments in so many early church writings of, hey, we have the authority because here's our line of succession, right? Don't ignore these things. Address them, face them, go face on with them and see what happens. Yeah, thanks guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and go check out this interview, and I hope Wes can release the one with Carson, because it is the 2 reels that I saw, hilarious.